All right, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling Chapter 8 of Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Oh, excellent choice.
Now, this chapter might seem like it's, all about ancient battles and stuff, but trust me, there's some seriously relevant stuff in here for, well, pretty much anyone, right? Like dealing with leadership dilemmas, making tough choices, navigating any kind of challenge.
Oh, absolutely. That's what's so amazing about Sun Tzu, his insights are just timeless, seriously. He can boil down these crazy complicated situations into these really clear principles that still work just as well today. I mean, think about it. He was writing this stuff centuries ago.
Right.
And we're still talking about it. Chapter 8 specifically, it really dives into how leaders should be sizing up situations, right?
Yeah.
Changing their approach when they need to, and ultimately how to just win, basically.
Yeah.
Whether it's a literal battlefield or, even just a tough project at work.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, okay, right off the bat, Sun Tzu starts talking about different types of terrain. He uses terms like intersecting ground, isolated ground, even desperate ground. And he actually lays out very specific advice for each one.
Oh, interesting.
Like, for example, on intersecting ground, he says you should be focusing on building alliances.
Right.
But on desperate ground, well, it's pretty much fight for your life.
Yeah, it sounds intense. But you know what's really interesting about all this terrain talk? It's not just about literal landscapes.
Oh, okay.
Think of it metaphorically.
Okay.
These terrains can represent any situation seriously. So intersecting ground, for example, that could be working on a team project where collaboration is key.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, and then isolated ground.
Yeah.
That could be that feeling of being totally alone when you're tackling a really tough problem.
Right, like you're on your own.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu's message here, it's loud and clear. You got to size up your situation and adapt. Seriously, adapt accordingly.
So it's all about being flexible.
Yes.
What's that saying?
Yeah.
Don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. But it's not even just about surviving, it's about actually thriving. Imagine you're trying to use the same tactics in a crowded market that you would in a quiet library.
Yeah.
Wouldn't work very well.
No, not at all.
And that same principle, it applies to every single challenge, big or small.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now here's where things get a little bit more interesting.
Okay.
Sun Tzu says, and I quote, "There are routes that should not be taken, commands from rulers that should not be obeyed."
Oh, wow.
Now that's pretty bold, wouldn't you say? I mean, it kind of goes against everything we're taught about following orders.
Yeah.
Especially, from those in charge.
Right. It does. It definitely does. And that's where this idea of strategic discretion comes into play. Sun Tzu, he understood that just chasing every opportunity or blindly following orders, well, it can lead to, disaster.
Yeah.
Sometimes the smartest move is to hold back, to say no, even when it seems totally counterintuitive.
So it's like knowing when to fold them in poker. Sometimes the best play is to not play at all.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it this way. You know that saying, all that glitters is not gold?
Right.
Well, a shiny opportunity might be hiding a ton of risk.
Yeah.
Like a beautiful house with a cracked foundation.
Right.
Or even a seemingly simple order from your boss, it might actually lead to this huge mess later on.
Yeah.
And being able to see those risks and actually being willing to walk away, well, that's a crucial part of making smart decisions.
I like that, yeah. So that kind of leads us into the heart of this chapter, which is this concept of the 9 variations.
Oh, yes.
Now, Sun Tzu, he gets a little mysterious here, right? He keeps talking about how important these 9 variations are. But he doesn't really define them outright.
Right. It's kind of like a secret code almost.
It is, yeah. So what are these 9 variations all about?
Well, think of them like a set of flexible principles or maneuvers that a leader can use to adapt to any situation.
Okay.
It's not about following a strict set of rules,
Right.
It's about having this framework for analyzing, planning, and responding to, well, anything, really.
So it's less about having a playbook and more about, having a well-stocked toolbox.
Exactly.
And knowing which tool to use for which job.
Yes. And mastering these 9 variations, that's what really separates a great leader from someone who's just reacting to whatever's happening, Yeah. Sun Tzu, he's all about being proactive, seeing the challenges before they actually show up, and having that flexibility to deal with them successfully.
Now, there was this next part that really stood out to me. Sun Tzu, he talks about how crucial it is to look at both the good and the bad in any situation. You know, the advantages and the disadvantages.
Oh, yeah, that's so important. That balance, it's like key for making good decisions. Wow. Knowing your advantages, that gives you confidence, you know?
Yep.
It helps you play to your strengths.
Right.
But acknowledging the potential downsides.
Yeah.
That's what lets you prepare, solve problems before they even pop up, and avoid unnecessary risks.
So it's not about being blindly optimistic or like a total downer.
Right.
It's about being realistic and, you know, having that balanced view of what's going on.
Absolutely. It's like you have to see both the sunny spots and the shadows. That's how you make smart choices.
Yes.
You know? Whether you're planning a huge project at work or, I don't know, even just trying to figure out a tricky personal relationship.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So Sun Tzu then goes on to talk about how to influence other people. Mm-hmm. And he mentions these three main ways to do it: causing harm, assigning tasks, and offering benefits.
Interesting.
I don't know. Sounds a little intense, right?
Yeah.
Like something a supervillain would do.
Haha. It's easy to see it that way. But you got to remember the context here. We're talking about ancient warfare.
Right.
Where, you know, alliances were shifting all the time.
Right.
So getting people on your side,
yeah,
or at least keeping them from joining the enemy.
Yeah.
It often involved, you know, pressure, responsibility, rewards, all that stuff.
Okay, so it's not just like, do this or I'll make your life miserable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Think of it more like causing harm doesn't always mean like physical harm, right? It could be as simple as, you know, pointing out the negative consequences of not doing something, you know?
Okay.
Or maybe the risks of siding with the other guy.
Gotcha. What about assigning tasks? Is that just, you know, delegating responsibility?
Well, it is that, but it's also about building commitment. You know, when you give someone a specific role, a specific task, it gives them a sense of ownership. It aligns their interests with yours. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
They become more invested in the outcome.
And then there's offering benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That one seems pretty, you know, straightforward.
Yeah.
You sweeten the deal to get people on board.
True, but it's not always about money or, you know, material rewards. It could be offering recognition.
Okay.
Praise, opportunities for growth, that sort of thing.
Right, right. Yeah. So it's about figuring out what makes people tick, you know?
Yeah.
And giving them incentives that line up with that. Now, this brings up a really interesting question.
Okay.
When is each of these methods, you know, like the right one to use? And are there any potential downsides to using any of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's where ethics come into play.
Right.
You know, in modern leadership, we really try to focus on collaboration, respect, and trying to motivate people through, you know, fear, coercion.
Yeah.
That can backfire big time. You can damage relationships that way.
So it's about using these methods wisely and ethically, considering the impact they might have on other people.
Exactly. A truly skilled leader, you know, they know how to inspire, motivate people, not through like commands or threats.
Right.
But by creating this shared sense of purpose where everyone benefits.
I really connected with this next passage. Sun Tzu says, "Do not rely on the enemy failing to come. Rely instead on being prepared to face them. Do not depend on the enemy refraining from attack. Depend instead on having an unassailable position."
Wow.
That's pretty powerful stuff. This is all about self-reliance, right? Taking control of your own destiny.
Absolutely. Sun Tzu, he's all about focusing on what you can control. Your own preparedness, resilience.
Yeah.
It's not about hoping your opponent's going to, you know, trip up or show weakness.
So it's kind of like the saying, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Exactly. Having backup plans, anticipating challenges, developing that mindset of self-reliance, it's essential, you know, for success in, well, anything, really.
So it's like if you're leading a team, managing your personal finances.
Right.
Even just navigating those everyday challenges in life, like, that's what you need.
Exactly.
It makes me think about how I handle, like, my personal finances. I'm pretty good about, like, budgeting and saving. But I don't really have a plan for those unexpected expenses that always seem to pop up.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's something I need to work on.
It's always smart to be prepared, you know? Like, those what-if scenarios, you wouldn't go on a hike without checking the weather first, right? Or packing some essentials.
Nope.
It's the same principle for other areas of life, you know? Be prepared.
Now, Sun Tzu, he doesn't shy away from pointing out those potential pitfalls that leaders can face. And he lists 5 dangerous traits.
Oh, okay.
Recklessness, clinging to life, quick anger, excessive scrupulousness, and excessive compassion.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It is. And some of those seem, kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Like, isn't compassion a good thing?
Well, yeah, of course it is. But, like anything else, too much of a good thing can become a problem.
Mm.
You see, these traits, they might all seem really different.
Right.
But they represent these vulnerabilities, right? That can be exploited, especially if you're in a leadership position.
Okay, so let's break them down a bit.
Okay.
We talked about recklessness earlier, charging into battle without thinking.
Right.
What about clinging to life? How can that be dangerous for a leader?
Well, imagine a leader who's like so afraid of failure or loss that they just won't take any risks. They might miss out on crucial opportunities, or they might hesitate to make tough decisions even when they really need to.
Yeah, like they're paralyzed by fear.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's quick anger.
Yeah.
We all know those people who like fly off the handle the drop of a hat, right?
Yeah.
But why is that a problem for a leader?
Yeah.
Well, a leader who's easily provoked, they can be manipulated by their enemies, They might make rash decisions based purely on emotion, not logic. And that can have some really, really bad consequences.
Yeah, that one's pretty clear. What about excessive scrupulousness?
Okay, so excessive scrupulousness.
Yeah, like how can being too honorable be a bad thing?
It's not about abandoning your principles, of course, but if you're like overly concerned with appearing virtuous or following every single rule to the letter, well, it can make you hesitant to act, even when action is absolutely necessary.
So it's about finding that balance again, right?
Yes.
Being ethical, but also knowing when to adapt and make tough calls.
Exactly. And then finally, we have excessive compassion. Empathy, it's essential for a good leader, obviously.
Right.
But being overly swayed by your emotions, it can really cloud your judgment. Sometimes as a leader, you have to make tough choices that, well, they might not be popular, but they're necessary for the greater good.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like that saying, sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. Right. Obviously, I'm not saying to be mean or heartless.
Yeah.
But sometimes those tough choices, you can't avoid them.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, leading with your heart.
Yeah.
But also using your head to make the best choices.
Wow, this is a lot to process. Sun Tzu really crammed a lot of wisdom into this chapter.
He did. But remember, it's not about memorizing a list of rules or traits. Right. It's about understanding the principles and then applying them to your own situation.
That's really helpful advice. So what are some key takeaways from this chapter that our listeners can, actually use in their lives?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of adaptability.
Okay.
Whether you're at work dealing with some personal dilemma or even just trying to figure out what to make for dinner, Yeah. Being willing to adjust your approach based on the situation, that's key.
So it's kind of like being a jazz musician.
Yeah.
Right? The basic melody.
Yeah.
But you also got to be able to improvise when you need to.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to deviate from the plan if things change. Another key takeaway is, self-reliance.
Okay.
Instead of waiting for someone else to solve your problems or hoping for a lucky break, focus on what you can control, your own skills, your knowledge, how prepared you are.
So it's about taking ownership, right?
Yeah.
Not waiting for someone to hand you success.
Exactly. And finally, remember those 5 dangerous traits. Being aware of them in yourself and others, it can help you make better decisions and avoid, those potential pitfalls.
That's really helpful. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to hear from our listeners. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to, exercise that strategic discretion? Like, how'd you handle it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about being aware and, just constantly learning and adapting to become a better leader.
This whole conversation, it's making me think about this situation I've got going on at work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my team, they're great, really. But we keep getting stuck on this one project. It's like, I don't know, we're on that isolated ground Sun Tzu was talking about.
Yeah.
Feeling lost, not sure which way to go.
That's a perfect example of how these principles can apply, to modern life.
Yeah.
Have you thought about which of those 9 variations might help your team out?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, we've mostly been just trying to power through it.
Yeah.
But maybe, like, a change in approach is what we need.
Could be.
Instead of forcing a solution, maybe we need to, like, step back and reassess.
Right, like Sun Tzu suggests. It's definitely worth considering. Remember, adaptability, that's key. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to, change direction for a bit.
Yeah.
Or even, like, retreat to regroup.
I like that. Okay, back to Sun Tzu's advice. He also really emphasizes not relying on your enemy making mistakes.
Right.
It's about being prepared yourself.
Mm-hmm.
He even says, do not depend on the enemy refraining from attack. Depend instead on having an unassailable position.
Wow.
That's powerful.
It is. Sun Tzu's basically saying, like, don't just sit around and hope your opponent messes up. You got to build yourself up so you're ready for anything. That idea of self-reliance is so important no matter what you're facing.
It's like that old saying, the best defense is a good offense.
Exactly. It's all about taking responsibility, right?
Yeah.
For your own preparedness, building resilience so you can handle whatever happens.
Right.
I mean, think about it. If you've got a solid backup plan, you're less likely to panic when things go wrong.
That's true.
Yeah.
It makes me think about how I handle my personal finances. Like, I'm pretty good at budgeting, saving, but I don't really have, like, a real plan for those unexpected expenses.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's something I should think about a bit more.
It's definitely smart to be prepared, for those what-if scenarios. Like, you wouldn't go on a hike without checking the weather and packing some essentials, right?
No. That's
the principle applies to, other parts of life.
Okay, before we wrap up this part.
Okay.
We got to talk about those 5 dangerous traits that Sun Tzu warns leaders about.
Oh, right. Yes.
He lists them as, let's see, recklessness, clinging to life, quick anger, excessive scrupulousness, and excessive compassion.
Wow. Some of those, they seem kind of counterintuitive, don't they?
They do, yeah. Like, isn't compassion a good thing?
It is. But like we said before, too much of a good thing. It can become a problem. These traits, it might seem really different, but they all represent vulnerabilities, things that can be exploited, especially if you're in a leadership position.
Okay, so let's break them down one by one.
Right.
We talked about recklessness earlier.
Yeah, charging into battle without a second thought.
Right.
Oh.
What about clinging to life? How's that dangerous for a leader?
Well, imagine a leader who's just like, terrified of failure or any kind of loss, They're so scared that they won't take any risks at all. So they might miss out on big opportunities.
Right.
Or hesitate to make those tough decisions.
Yeah, like they're frozen, can't move forward.
Exactly. And then there's quick anger. We all know people who fly off the handle really easily.
Yeah.
But why is that a problem for a leader specifically? Well, think about it. Someone who's easily provoked, they can be manipulated. Right? Their enemies can use that against them. They might make rash decisions, based on pure emotion, not logic.
Right.
And that can be disastrous.
Okay, that was pretty clear. What about excessive scrupulousness?
Excessive scrupulousness.
Yeah.
Okay.
How can being too honorable be a bad thing?
It's not about abandoning your principles, obviously.
Right.
But if you're so concerned with, like, appearing virtuous or following every single rule perfectly, it can make you hesitate to act even when you really need to.
So it's about that balance again, right?
Yes.
Being ethical, but also being able to adapt, make those tough calls.
Exactly. And then finally, excessive compassion.
Right.
Now, empathy, that's essential for any good leader, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you're too swayed by your emotions, well, it can cloud your judgment. Sometimes, as a leader, you got to make hard decisions.
Right.
Ones that might not be popular.
Yeah.
But they're what's needed for everyone to succeed in the end.
That's a really good point. It's like that saying, sometimes you got to be cruel to be kind, right?
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Obviously, I'm not advocating for being mean or anything.
Right, of course.
But sometimes those tough choices, they're unavoidable.
They are. It's all about finding that balance, leading with your heart, but also using your head to make the best possible choices.
Wow. Sun Tzu really packed a lot into this chapter.
He did. But like we've been saying, it's not about memorizing everything, It's about understanding the principles and applying them to your own life.
Yeah, that's helpful. So, like, what are some key takeaways that our listeners can, use right now?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is adaptability.
Okay.
Whether you're facing a challenge at work, a personal dilemma, or even, just trying to figure out what to make for dinner.
Yeah.
Being willing to adjust based on the situation, that's crucial.
So it's like being a jazz musician.
Yeah, exactly.
You know the melody.
Yeah.
But you can improvise when you need to.
Right. Don't be afraid to change things up if the situation calls for it. Another key takeaway is self-reliance.
Okay.
Instead of waiting for someone else to fix things or hoping for good luck, focus on what you can control, your skills, your knowledge, your preparation.
So taking ownership, right?
Exactly.
Not waiting for someone to hand it to you.
Right. And finally, remember those 5 dangerous traits we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Being aware of them in yourself and others, that can help you make smarter decisions and avoid those potential traps.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Now, before we go to the final part of our deep dive,
okay,
I want to hear from our listeners. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to exercise that strategic discretion? Like, how'd you handle it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys.
It's really amazing how much we can learn from something written like thousands of years ago, right?
It is.
Yeah, it just shows you that human nature, those challenges we face, they haven't really changed all that much.
Nope.
Even if the battlefields have.
Right. Exactly.
So, before we wrap things up here, I got to ask, how can our listeners actually, practically apply this whole 9 variations thing to a problem they're dealing with right now? It's one thing to get the concept.
Yeah.
But how do you actually use it?
That's a great question. I think the key is to shift your thinking a little bit, move away from trying to find that one perfect solution and instead embrace the idea of having multiple options.
Okay.
So it's about looking at your strengths,
Yeah.
weaknesses, but in the context of that specific situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the pros and cons of each path you could take?
Right.
And maybe most importantly, how can you stay flexible?
Yeah.
Adapt your strategy as things change. Because things always change.
So it's not about getting stuck in one way of thinking. It's about having all these different tools.
Yes.
And being ready to switch them up as you go.
Exactly. Be open to different perspectives, different approaches. Remember, the situation, it's always evolving.
Right.
So your strategies have to evolve too.
This reminds me of something I was reading about entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the really successful ones. They're often described as incredibly adaptable, resilient. They don't give up easy, and they're always willing to change their business if they need to.
Right. That's a perfect example. They're living proof that Sun Tzu's principles, they're not just for ancient generals or whatever.
Yeah.
They're for anyone who wants to, handle challenges effectively and reach their goals.
So to sum it all up, Chapter 8 of The Art of War is like this goldmine of wisdom, really.
It is.
For leaders, decision makers, anyone who wants to approach life with a bit more strategy.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, it's not about memorizing a bunch of rules,
right,
trying to become some kind of warrior monk.
Yeah.
It's about developing that mindset, adaptability, awareness, strategic thinking, all of that.
Well said. So on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. How can you apply this idea of the 9 variations to something you're facing right now?
Yeah, good question.
What are your options? How can you adapt as things unfold?
We encourage you to keep digging into the art of war, see how it can help you in your own life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, the best way to win any battle, whether it's on a battlefield or in the boardroom, is to be prepared.